You probably didn't click on this because you love watching the news with your morning coffee. More likely, you've hit that quiet point where you think, I just can't do this anymore. The headlines, the outrage, the disasters, your nervous system has started tapping out. Maybe you've noticed it in small ways. You swipe past news posts faster. You turn off notifications you used to check obsessively. You hear people arguing about politics or war and feel this heavy mix of guilt and relief that you have no idea what they're talking about. If that's you, this isn't a video about ignorance, it's about self-defense and the psychology of people who quietly choose peace over a 24/7 crisis feed. Here's the thing. You are absolutely not alone. Global surveys from the Reuters Institute show that around 4 in 10 people now say they sometimes or often avoid the news, up from less than 3 in 10 just a few years ago. When researchers ask why, people use the same words over and over. The news feels relentless, bad for my mood, too negative, overwhelming, and pointless because I can't change anything anyway. In other words, it's not that people suddenly stopped caring about the world, it's that the way information hits them now is too much for too long. Your brain is wired to care about threats. Psychologists call this negativity bias. Bad news grabs attention faster and sticks longer than good news. News outlets know this. Algorithms know this. So your feed is engineered into a highlight reel of the worst things happening on the planet, updated every few minutes. What used to be, I'll watch the evening news once a day, has turned into, I carry a global crisis machine in my pocket and check it when I wake up, on the toilet, during lunch, in bed at 1 a.m. Doomscrolling, that endless spiral of negative headlines, tweets, and clips, feels like staying informed. But study after study links heavy doom scrolling to more anxiety, more depression, worse sleep, and lower life satisfaction. One research review found that people who immerse themselves in hours of crisis coverage show higher acute stress than some people who are actually near the event. Your body doesn't know the difference between seeing it happen on a screen and being under threat. It just floods you with stress chemistry on repeat. So at some point, your mind does something very logical. It reaches for the off switch. Not because you don't care about injustice, climate, or politics, but because your nervous system is tired of being in permanent emergency mode about things you can't personally stop. Psychologists who study information avoidance put it simply, when information only makes you feel worse and you have no sense of control over it, avoidance starts to look like the only sane option. If you've ever thought, I can't watch the news, it ruins my whole day, that's emotional self-regulation, not weakness. Therapists hear this from clients all the time. A single doom-scrolling session leads to intrusive thoughts, nightmares, rumination about everything is going downhill, and total focus collapse at work or school. Turning the volume down on that stream is, for a lot of people, the first real act of self-care they allow themselves. There's also simple cognitive fatigue. We live in what media researchers call a high-choice environment. Push alerts, live blogs, think pieces, TikToks, podcasts, all vying for space in the same 24 hours. Constantly task switching between breaking alerts doesn't just make you tired, it lowers comprehension and leaves you with this foggy sense that you've read everything and understood almost nothing. When your mental bandwidth already feels limited by work, family, money, and your own thoughts, choosing no more news today is often just bandwidth triage. And then there's trust. If you've ever looked at a headline and thought, that's obviously bait, you're not imagining it. Sensational framing, outrage thumbnails, partisan spin, all of that erodes the feeling that news is about informing you rather than manipulating your emotions. Therapists point out that some people use distrust as a psychological shield. If everything is biased, then you never have to let any of it in deeply enough to hurt you. It's a way to say, why should I sacrifice my mental health for a system that doesn't even feel honest? But not all news avoiders are the same. Some are burnt-out doom scrollers who slam the brakes. Others are people who never really built the habit in the first place and now feel written off as uninformed because they protect their attention. Younger people, especially, show the highest rates of turning away from traditional news, not because they don't know how to care, but because they're already overwhelmed trying to keep their own lives functioning in an unstable world. Psychologically, what many of these people are doing is shifting focus from external chaos to internal control. If global crises feel endless and unsolvable at the individual level, it makes sense to put your energy into the few zones you can actually move: your work, your relationships, your health, your immediate community. Information avoidance research shows people are far more willing to seek out difficult information when they believe there's something concrete they can do with it, a step they can take, a behavior they can change. When it's just another story about corruption, war, or disaster on the other side of the world, the main thing it changes is your mood. So if you're the person who's quietly opted out, who doesn't open news apps anymore, who mutes certain words, who lets group chats argue about headlines you haven't read, what does that actually say about you? Not that you're apathetic. Often, it points to a few traits: high sensitivity to emotional input, low tolerance for feeling helpless, and a strong desire to protect your limited mental resources. You're someone whose mind doesn't just see a headline and move on. It sits with it, imagines it, feels it, and after years of that, you started drawing a line. There are risks to total avoidance. If you never engage with any news, you can miss information that actually is actionable. Elections, local policies, health warnings, financial decisions. And completely checking out can, over time, feed a different kind of helplessness. The sense that the world is happening out there, and you're just a passenger. But inside that risk is also a clue. The point isn't watch everything or watch nothing. It's to stop letting an algorithm decide how scared and exhausted you should feel today. The people who seem to navigate this best aren't the ones glued to the feed or the ones who never look at it. They're the ones who treat news like a tool, not a lifestyle. They check in on purpose at specific times from a few sources they trust. They decide what topics they can actually act on and which ones they will consciously limit because they know their own nervous system's limits. That's not denial. That's boundaries. If you've ever felt guilty for taking a break from the news, like you're failing some moral test, remember this. Even the researchers who study doomscrolling say the antidote isn't no less, it's be intentional. Your mental health is not an acceptable casualty of the news cycle. You're allowed to protect it first and then decide how much of the world's pain you're able to carry on any given day. And if this episode felt uncomfortably accurate, if you've quietly pulled away from the news to save your sanity, share it with the one friend who keeps asking, how can you not watch this stuff? Drop in the comments where you're at right now. Full news junkie, intentional check-in, or total media detox, and what pushed you there. Because the more honestly we talk about why people are turning away from the news, the easier it gets to build a way of staying informed that doesn't cost you your peace.